Okay, I call the meeting to order, the New Ulm Airport Advisory Commission meeting, scheduled for May 9th, 2017, 4 o'clock. First thing on the agenda is election of officers. Anything we should,
Mr. Vice Chair, I've provided you with a list of the 2016 officers. Chair was Tom Berg, Vice Chair was yourself, William Fensky, and Secretary was Brian Landerville. And you should accept nominations for one or all of the positions at this time.
okay, I accept nominations, or
Do you
Brian, are you
two
interested in?
wish to
staying?
serve on and
I'll do another year.
positions?
Yeah, I'll do it another year too. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
For-
Is there a motion has to be made
oh,
first?
Well, okay,
That's what
I make a
yes.
motion that we approve the election of officers, same as last year, or this year, the last year.
So move.
Yeah. Okay, so that there'll
We
be,
need a second on that.
oh, yeah,
I'll second.
okay. And so,
And then we vote.
okay, yeah, that's right, we gotta vote it.
It's been rusty because we haven't been here.
You're
for a
right,
while.
we haven't been meeting.
I
and
can't,
kinda
sorry, I can't help you out
Forget
either.
what's going on. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We have elected officers the same as last year. Okay, approval of minutes, approval of minutes for the May 10th, 2016 meeting.
We've had a meeting since then, obviously, but we've
Yeah.
just heard the minutes. Is that correct?
I wonder when the last meeting was.
Hang on, Mr. Vice Chair, let me, no, that, we had called one in February of 2017, and we didn't achieve a quorum at that time, so we have not had a meeting since
Right.
May 10th of 2016. That's correct.
Okay.
And the first meeting of January, the chair was on vacation. The second meeting, we had no quorum, as I've mentioned. The next meeting, the chair was skiing, and we really didn't have any business. And the next meeting, the chair was had an injury. So that brings us to May of this year.
I move. We approve the minutes.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. Old business. Received crosswind runway focused planning study updated with response to the FAA comments.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I make a couple quick comments, for those of you that have been on the Airport Commission, you understand there's been kind of a long planning process that has been undertaken by our consulting engineer, Mead and Hunt. Brian Page is here today to kind of update you on the process of the study and where we're at with that particular study. There were some comments that were received back from both the FAA and MnDOT Aeronautics that the consultant has waded through and supplied back to the agency, and he might have some comments on that.
Okay.
Thanks.
So what's your position then? He took over Mark's? Does he have,
Over for Mark first?
so is he just a board member or,
Yes, commission member.
Just a-
Yeah,
Commission
commission
member.
member, yeah.
and he was voted in? Do we have to vote him in at all?
Appointed by a member of the city council. I can't remember which one.
Do you know by any chance who appointed?
Remember who it was, Joe?
Ward 3, whoever that is. We can find that out for you, Brian.
Ward 3?
That's what it says.
Les. Les would be Ward 3.
Okay, I'm not sure.
No.
I think he might be Mr. Buckley's.
Second is appointed by the mayor? No?
No,
No, it's a
appointed by the
councilman.
Council.
Let me get you that information.
Okay.
Sorry, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
No
Maybe a little background to kind of get
No
everybody
worries, no
up to
worries.
speed and a new member on the same page and go from there.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Steve, Joe, Mr. Mayor. I am Brian Page. I am with Mead and Hunt. I am the airport representation of the consultant that is the city's consultant for the airport work. We've been involved, as Steve has mentioned, for the last several years doing a lot of improvements out at the airport. And things are kind of in transition between projects at this point. We finished up a fairly large runway development project over the last several years that did culminate in also doing the taxiway as well. And now the focus is really kind of turned toward the crosswind runway. The crosswind runway itself, for many of the members of the commission that may know some of the history behind it, the existing crosswind runway, there is a turf runway out at the airport. It is alignment 422. And I'm not sure if any of you have a copy of the drawings or a copy of the focus planning study, but I would focus your attention to the exhibit that's in the drawing that is listed as 4-9, which kind of looks like this. It's the exhibit toward the end of the various different 11 by 17 exhibits that are in the report. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit for some of the folks, Commissioner Zollner's benefit, talk a little bit about what the issues are that we're trying to solve. If you look at that drawing, you'll see kind of the grade area, and it has runway 422 designated on it. You'll see in the direction and the alignment where that crosswind runway goes, it essentially goes right over the top of the residential neighborhood, the Sarah Hills addition, that's just on the other side of Highland Avenue. That is a problem. It doesn't have the appropriate clear zone area as required by MnDOT Aeronautics to be able to maintain safety off the end of the airport. So what needs to happen in this area is the crosswind runway has to be relocated to an area that it can actually have the space at both ends of the runway to be able to protect for the various different zones. And kind of referring back to that drawing 4-9, that is the preferred alternative. There were several different alternatives that were explored as part of that study. This was the one that solved the problems of wind coverage for the airport, but then also took a look into the future if that runway to grow or expand in one direction or the other, just to make sure there's the proper amount of real estate out there in order to be able to facilitate that. So this was the focus planning study, which it took roughly about a year to complete, and there was a lot of stakeholder involvement through the Federal Aviation Administration and also the MnDOT, Department of Transportation Office of Aeronautics. And this was, in essence, the alternative that rose to the top of the one that would be the most practical for New Ulm to solve the problems. What Stephen mentioned, the report was finished. After the report was finished, there were several comments that came back from the FAA that they wanted some additional information regarding certain elements in the report. And in essence, that was what was on the agenda for tonight. What we've done is we've actually taken a look at all of those different comments and then provided a response to all the comments back to the FAA. So we're kind of at a milestone completion, if you would. The study is, for all intents and purposes, complete. What the next phase is to move into doing the master plan update and the airport layout plan update, which is going to be part of the new business in the next section. But in essence, just to complete item number 3, which is the old business, not really looking for, I guess, just open it up to questions that the commission might have regarding the report or where we go from here. But in essence, tonight, what we'd be looking for is just to gain your approval that the report is accepted.
Okay. Any questions for him? Comments? So we could go on with the new business then? Am I right? Or has anybody
Mr. Chair,
got-
I think it would be appropriate if you made a motion to accept the report.
Oh, okay. All right, make a motion to accept the report. Can we have a motion?
Second?
Okay, motion's been made and seconded that, to receive the report that he just gave us. All right? Okay. Then we should go on to new business?
Correct.
Okay. Consider recommending submitting a FY 2017 federal grant application to undertake an airport master plan and an ALP update.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick comments. Mr. Page just mentioned that that would be the next step after this report was completed. A year ago, we had talked about, or the commission had talked about and considered moving ahead with the zoning of the crosswind runway, and as we backed into this, the process really required that the layout plan and the master plan be updated so that we could zone to that plan. So we're kind of taking a couple of steps backwards and attacking that first. So I don't know if you have any other comments, Brian.
No, that's a good summary. What we're looking to do is kind of considering this more of kind of a long distance or a marathon more than a sprint in getting to the end result of getting this crosswind runway issue solved. And along the way, there are several different procedural things that need to occur. As Steve has mentioned, one of the big drivers behind doing and taking a look at this crosswind runway is for the reason that if you kind of refer back to your exhibit 4-9, that if you look at what's going on in the yellow area that kind of forms more or less of that trapezoidal shape off the end of the runway, that trapezoidal shape, as you can see, stretches all the way out to and beyond Highland Avenue. And what MnDOT, as part of their licensing agreement for all public airports in the state, requires is for the community to go through, if it's a public service airport, to be able to zone according to state standards. And that was part of the issue that was related to the existing crosswind runway alignment, that what had happened is there was some zoning that was set in place, I think it was back in the 1980s. But one of the problems with it is there was never any zoning constructed for that crosswind runway. So what ended up happening over time, there are things that kind of crept into the restricted areas where it should have been zoned. Since it wasn't, now it's kind of become an issue that you really can't zone for it now and be able to meet the state statutory requirements. So something needs to happen with that end. And that's where, if you go back to 4-9 with the yellowish layout that's shown in the alternative 4-9, that shows an area that could be zoned. And coincidentally, if you look at the area in that trapezoidal shape that's to the east end of the runway or closest to town, you'll note that all of the entire area essentially is just farm field at this point. Now, not to say that down the road is still going to be farm field, particularly on the other side of Highland Avenue. We could end up with some development or something in that area. And really, one of the main focuses of what we're trying to do here is to be able to provide some zoning out there so the city can protect for that area for the future. So in order to do that and to get to that step in the zoning process, the first step you would need to do is have a document, a federal document and a state document that's been accepted by both those agencies that gives you basically the basis for what you're zoning for. In essence, you would look, the runway itself would be shown in those planning documents and eventually accepted by the state and federal agencies. And once that occurs, you could use that as the basis to be able to provide your zoning at the local level. And that's really kind of the purpose of what we're looking for the approval for to move forward in the new business for tonight. The grant writing season, in order to be able to give federal participation, to be able to move forward with that planning document, which is going to be a master plan update in addition to what they call an airport layout plan. That's the ALP side of it. The ALP side of it is basically a set of plans that shows all of the different geometrics associated with the airport. Shows all the FAA surfaces, all the MnDOT surfaces. Last time that the master plan was updated for the New Ulm Airport was 1976. So it's probably long overdue. The ALP has been updated since, updated probably at least twice that I'm aware of. But at the same time, the original master plan for which the ALP is designed around, that master plan is so far out of date. What you're trying to do is basically bring the two back into sync with one another. So that's where the next step in the process would be, is to be able to move forward with that master plan and ALP update and submit a grant. These are federally eligible and state eligible projects, but the window in order to be able to apply for that grant is going to be, in essence, the application needs to be submitted to the FAA by July 15th. And the end of the federal fiscal year ends at the end of September. So you can see that we're kind of crunching down to the wire for this fiscal year. And it's not like after, say October 1st, you would be able to apply for a grant right away and get one. You would have to wait until next spring in 2018 to be able to apply. So I guess the main upshot for tonight would be is if the commission should decide to move forward with trying to move forward with this master plan / ALP update, we would have to get that process moving in order to be able to submit for the grant coming up here in a few short weeks.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Mr. Chairman?
Tom, how are you?
Well, still kind of wounded, but I'm getting there.
It's not on there.
It's the
Oh, it's
last
not
time, I just leave it.
Oh, okay.
So do we motion to vote and approve you continuing the master plan update?
Well, to be able to move forward with the grant application, we still have a little bit of work to do as far as the master plan scope and the work involved. That's something that generally we need to sit down with the federal FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and also MnDOT. Sit down with both those agencies and make sure that they agree to the scope. But really, the purpose of tonight is to basically describe what it is that we're looking to do in 2017 and then gain the commission's approval if they decide to move forward with moving forward with that process with the state and federal agencies.
Which we should
So I think,
probably
Mr.
do.
Chair, the appropriate action would be recommending submitting the application for
I
fiscal year
I do
2017.
have a question. Does the change in the administration at the federal level going to impact any of these grants, to your knowledge?
Well, the president, as you know, has just signed the federal budget, and which basically charged or energized the checkbook, so to speak, including the funding that supports this program. But it only goes through this fiscal year. So once this fiscal year expires at the end of September, it's going to be a new year going forward. What we have heard, and maybe what you're referring to perhaps, is there has been some discussion about a form of stimulus, if you would, going into some transportation projects. And that could happen, but that would be down the road, maybe in 2018. But if you were, say, for instance, ready to go and it was a shovel-ready project, the city could benefit from that, potentially. But again, it's speculation at this point, merely, articles, written in a newspaper. So,
Thank you.
Motion to accept the federal grant application to continue?
So
Second.
moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? approved.
Okay, I'm here to answer any additional questions that you might have about the process moving forward. Yeah, Steve and I have had some conversations about this topic. The state has kind of moved a little bit, and as well as the FAA, in a direction that looking for a lot more justification, primarily for crosswind runways. And that's been the challenge for this project. Generally speaking, it would be something that, you've gone through and done some upfront planning. You did that as part of the environmental assessment, for which the city had gotten a determination back in, I believe it was 2010, if I remember correctly. One of the proposed actions that was listed in that federal NEPA document was the crosswind runway. But what's happened since then is there's been a lot of regulatory changes. There's been a lot of, MnDOT changes over that period of time. So what the agencies are asking is to go back and take a harder look and go through these things, and the proper setting or the proper format in order to do something like that is this master plan and ALP update. So it's not to say, and I still believe it's going to be a process that we're going to have to go through. I don't think anybody is suggesting that we're going to be out there turning dirt or shovels next year. But this is, again, as I referenced before, more of a marathon. It's a long distance race. It's not a sprint. To get projects like this and the kind of money that it's going to take get approved, it's going to be a long-term process. But this is one of those procedural steps that we need to follow in order to be able to get, to where we want to go. So.
Steve, question for you maybe. If a person or an industry wanted to build out there within this proposed safety zone, could the city hold it up until the zoning was amended, or under current rules would it be they'd have to approve it, which would impact then the study?
Mr. Chair, Peter, you're talking about the unzoned crosswind area?
Yes.
Yeah, the future proposed. We could not enforce land use zoning if it's not in place. What we can do in the case of ISD 88 is a good example. We had a development agreement that said they have to conform to the existing and planned future zoning, which was included on the previous ALP. So there are some ways to get around that and hold it. But again, the next step to get to the zoning is the master plan update and airport layout plan update. So I think it's wise for the commission to recommend that we at least apply for that federal grant. We'll get the dollar values back to you in the future. So,
What's the timeline once it is submitted? How long until the FAA comes back and says, yes, we have this document, it's okay?
That's a good question. As far as the application is concerned, the applications are going to be due in mid-July. Typically, MnDOT likes to see them a little bit earlier because they like to usually kind of vet them before they go on to the Federal Aviation Administration. The state will have an interest in this project as well, not as much as the FAA, but there will be a financial contribution from the state. But once, say for instance, it is finally submitted in its final form by mid-July, it generally is going to take roughly a 45 to 60-day process turnaround for the FAA to look at it and say, okay, all the documentation, everything's in place. And then the next step will be is they will issue an grant offer to the city of New Ulm for this master plan and ALP update. Would anticipate that probably happening right around mid-August to late August at that point. And then once the city gets the grant offer, if you would, then the city could decide whether or not they wanted to move forward with the project, accept the grant or not, and go from there. Once that begins, it usually takes roughly about another 4 weeks roughly to get the project underway. The project itself is going to take roughly we're estimating 10 to 12 months to complete, so roughly a year to go through the entire process. And The reason for that is there's a lot of meetings, a lot of public output, or public input meetings and public hearings, things like that. So it will take time, I guess, to get through that process. So we'd be looking at, if we did get started, we're probably looking at late 2018 before that study would be complete.
And once this all is done, what is the construction time estimate, do you know, in order to build the runway?
The construction estimate, the next step in the process will be is there is some other documentation that will need to be done. One of them is going to be another federal environmental assessment will need to take place to be able to meet NEPA requirements. Once that process starts, that's going to take several months to unfold again. But once that process reaches its conclusion, if there is an issue of no significant impact given to the project, then that document will be used in order to be able to engage in the land acquisition that's going to be necessary for the project. There are several different parcels. You can look at the focus planning study. It did talk about the parcels that would be slated for acquisition. So then the next process would be is to move into that acquisition part of things. If there were any impacts, I don't think there will be, but if there was any significant impacts, we'd have to mitigate those in that time period as well. But say, for instance, how long is the land going to take? That could take another year, maybe longer. So you're probably looking at, at least 3 or 4 years down the road, realistically. And that's just an estimate, but 3 or 4 years down the road before you'd be turning any shovels.
I don't have any more questions at this time.
There is one more item of new business, 4B. Future meetings with MnDOT Aeronautics and FAA. I put that on the agenda, Mr. Chair. Number 1, the Crosswind Runway Development Plan. Number 2, the pending master plan update, ALP and other projects, what we had just talked about. It's something that Brian and I will be attending and can handle, but we wanted the commission to be aware of these meetings will be scheduled. If anybody's interested, you can tag along and be part of the process and kind of get a flavor and understanding of the hoops that have to be, taken through and gotten over to accomplish these things. So we certainly would like to invite anyone that would want to attend, the chair or anyone else. By the way, Mr. Berg, you were reelected chair.
Thanks a lot.
So, other than that, Brian, I don't know if you have any comments on it. We haven't scheduled them, but they're certainly there if you'd like to attend them.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is Steve and I had talked about this. It would be advantageous to do these meetings and conduct these meetings prior to submitting the grant application. So we are looking to get these meetings scheduled and hold them sometime within the next, month or so. Otherwise, it kind of gets a little bit too late to, really have them be a productive part of the application. So I guess we will let you know. I guess we'll try to get that coordinated through the FAA and the state, and then disseminate that information, I guess, as to when those meetings are looking to occur. And we certainly.
What does that process look like? Do we need to go to them, or will they send somebody to meet with us, or?
More than likely.
Got to go to them, right?
Yeah, more than likely in a case like this, they're very busy this time of year, doing a lot of applications. There's well over 100, public airports in the state. So all of them are looking to do their applications, so they'd probably be looking for you to come to them.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
So, I'm kind of late. I'm sorry, guys.
Better late
It's
than
okay.
never.
We're glad to see you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm glad to be anywhere, to tell you the truth.
So then the only item then remaining is 4C, unless you had any other discussion, is set the next meeting date.
For June 13th.
Tuesday, June 13th, yeah, well, which is the, normal date, so
Correct.
I guess we,
Motion to adjourn.
yeah, well, okay. So I need a movement for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
I
Second.
second. All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against?